Mr. Armchair, you made a video talking about whether or not trans women should be allowed to fight cis women in MMA. And I, a cis woman, have some things to say about it. Actually, I've got quite a lot to say about it. There's a lot to unpack. This video is going to be a lot longer than yours. And I'm going to slip a little bit between addressing armchair violence directly and you guys who do martial arts who like to go on about this. Because reality is that armchair violence is actually pretty representative of the views of men who do martial arts about women who do martial arts. The attitudes are just, yeah, it's all pretty similar. I've argued with a lot of these men. They do all have these same sort of attitudes. So, first thing I think we really need to be clear about, Mr. Armchair, it is not for you to decide whether or not cis women should be allowed to fight trans women in MMA. It is not for you to speak for us. Where do you get this idea that it's just about you and what you think and what you want? Yeah, I watched that video a few times, it's really annoying, hate it. And first thing I noticed is that you didn't actually ask any women, did you? And you admitted it in the comments. I'm going to talk about that. It's not that hard to ask women how they feel about trans women fighting cis women in MMA. There's articles out there where cis women who do MMA fights talk about how they feel about trans women doing MMA fights. Did you even think to look? Doesn't look like it. Or maybe you did, but they didn't have like the proper arguments or something. And I genuinely, watching that, I will be honest, I don't feel like you even thought you were talking to women. And that's a big problem with all of you guys talking about this. You're all just a bunch of guys talking about whether or not cis women should be allowed to fight trans women in martial arts. You don't think to ask us, and you don't care what we think a lot of the time. I know this because I've told them. They don't care what I think. And you don't either. Quite certain of that. And I'm just going to explain a little bit why. So you did have a comment from a man who said, when I last saw this argument, it was in the BJJ subreddit a few years ago. The overwhelming majority of commenters were against trans women competing with cis women. But it's fair to say that the overwhelming majority of BJJ subredditors are men. The users who actually said they were women were largely in favour of competing against trans women. Some were unsure, and one woman was against it. Women are the people who should be leading the debate on this issue because it is their health and the integrity of their division that is on the line. If women are happy to sacrifice fairness for inclusivity, that is a decision for them to make. It is our job as men to elevate women's voices and otherwise take a back seat in this debate. Secondly, and in light of my previous statement, to directly rebut the main argument against trans women competing against cis women, bracket, increased muscle mass and bone density, close brackets, I have only two words: weight classes. So, Mr. Armchair, what did you say? What were your thoughts on this? I think that I'm actually someone that should speak up on this because I don't have a stake in this. Having subject matter knowledge and having nothing on the line is pretty much the best kind of judge you can ask for. I don't think my gender really affects the validity of my opinion. But if you want to limit it to people that have something on the line, it should be limited to women that actually compete, not simply all women. Women that don't compete have just as much of a stake in it as I do. The voices that should be elevated should be the voices with the most knowledge, the least bias, and the best arguments. Not necessarily the ones from the proper gender. Matt Granato replies, thank you, Matt, by the way, for saying this. You were the only person I could find in the comments who raised this, and you did very well. Proper allyship. Thank you very much. Thanks for replying. It's true that the most important voices are to raise our female competitors. Maybe you could interview some or talk to some female martial arts YouTubers or something. Or provide links to trans/women's lead YouTube blogs or blogs or something like that. You don't have to take my suggestions, but right now the discourse is dominated by cis male voices when our opinions, although valid, are barely relevant. You have a YouTube channel that has a decent sized audience. You're smart enough to recognise and call out bias and logical fallacies. You have the opportunity to raise the voices of male competitors. So, Mr. Armchair, did you take any of that on board? Because I don't see it. I looked through all of your videos, all right? You haven't got a huge number because you've not been going that long. And there was one about rolling with women, which is a very sensible and thoughtful and helpful video about how men really should be prepared to roll with women in BJJ. It's a big issue. Thank you for saying all that. But you don't really address this. I don't see you talking to any women who do MMA about this in any subsequent videos. Don't see you ever addressing the issue again. And I find it really funny that you say this. I think that I'm actually someone that should speak up on this because I don't have a stake in it. Having subject matter knowledge and having nothing on the line is pretty much the best kind of judge you can ask for. I don't think my gender really affects the validity of my opinion. Right. So, here's the thing, Mr. Armchair. Do you have any idea how absolutely fucking sick women are of men like you finding reasons to decide you are best people to talk for us? You're always doing it. You're always finding reasons why it's you that are the best people, when we can't speak for ourselves. You're always doing it. Every fucking time you want to exclude us, you find reasons why you're somehow better placed, you're more objective. No, you're fucking not. It's a fucking lie. It's always about maintaining your interests. Every fucking time. And it is here. You do have a stake in it. You're lying when you say that, and you know that you're lying too. And the stake that you have in this is maintaining the myth of male supremacy. That's the stake you have in this. We know this. Women know this, okay? When you say you would destroy any woman in an MMA fight who was the same weight, same height, same skill level as you, that is you playing into the myth of male supremacy, okay? The only reason you can say that without getting trolled mercilessly in the comments is because the myth of male supremacy holds so strong. It's the only reason. Women know that's not true, okay? Women who do combat sports, we know that's not true. We know you're lying. And every fucking time a guy like you says that, we get so pissed off because we know that it's not true. But you want to keep saying that, and that's what your stake in is in this. You want to be able to believe that. You want everyone to believe that. That's your stake in this. You want everybody to be able to believe that you could effectively destroy a woman of the same skill level and the same weight as you. That's your stake in this. And you're fucking lying when you say you don't have one, because you do. Your gender totally affects this. Because you men, you all want to dominate. You all have these misogynist arguments about how women are rubbish and can't defend themselves and stuff against men. You all do it every fucking time. I've done this a lot. It's about fucking time you listen to women's. Like, it's 2022, okay? Not the fucking 1950s. There are decades of feminist literature out there, decades of pamphlets and magazines. You could have picked up a single one of them and had a look, and you would know that you are wrong to say this. You would know that you are wrong to try and claim that you are best placed to speak for women. You would know that you are wrong to claim that you have no stake in this. But you haven't done that, have you? Never even thought to look at this from a feminist angle at all. And there's YouTubers as well. There's like men who make YouTube videos, cis-het white men who you might be prepared to listen to. All right? They make YouTube videos. If you don't want to read something, watch a fucking YouTube video about this. And then you just might understand what is wrong, except maybe you do actually understand what's wrong and you want to keep things this way. Because I don't believe for a second your concern is about women, and neither do women either. Because I'll tell you something, women know what the real problems for women are in martial arts, okay? It's not trans women fighting in MMA, okay? Trans women are like nothing in relevance to the average woman going to a martial arts lesson, okay? Hardly any cis woman is going to be in a lesson with a trans woman, all right? Even fewer are going to be going to fight in MMA. We know you don't care about us because you don't talk about the things that really concern us, okay? And when we hear you talking, going on and on and on about trans women in MMA, we don't like it. Because it means that you are taking the focus away from the real issues. Because like the biggest danger for women in martial arts lessons and in MMA, to be honest, are going to be the cisgender male teachers, okay? Because so many of them are predatory. Don't see you talking about that. I don't see you talking about the kind of problems that women have to deal with just going to a fucking lesson. The kind of comments they'll have to deal with, the fact that men just assume they're there to date them and get really angry when women aren't interested in that and they just want to learn. There's a blog post, and you don't have to just, rely on me, okay? There's a blog post on a blog called Under the Ropes called How to Be an Ally to Women in Muay Thai, okay? She'll tell, it lays out all the problems that women really have to deal with, things that we would really like for you to talk about, okay? Have a read, and it will say, and there is a bit in it about trans people, about the fact that you just go on about it and we know you don't care, because what you're really doing is weaponising us to justify your transphobia, and we don't like it. And there's another thing, okay? So, there was a survey. I'll link the blog post, by the way, and then there's this survey here. An article about a survey, sorry. I'll link the article about the survey, and in this survey it found that the study found less than a quarter of women, 24%, believed trans women have an unfair advantage when they play on a female sports team, whereas nearly half of men, 46%, believed this to be the case. These findings are consistent with other research conducted in 23 different sports, including team sports, e.g. soccer, netball and Aussie rules, as well as full contact individual sports, e.g. kickboxing and taekwondo. This research found only a minority of women, 39%, believed trans women have an unfair advantage. However, just 9%, okay, less than 10% of women this is, expressed strong agreement with this statement. In contrast, a majority of men, 65%, believed trans women have an unfair advantage, and more than a quarter, 27%, strongly agreed with this statement. So that's like 3 times the amount of men strongly agree that trans women have an unfair advantage. I think that should tell you something. So, I think we need to be very clear about this. Women aren't listening to you. You can whine about this all you like, but women aren't listening to you. We know you don't care about us, okay? We really do. Because we have to deal with the real problems while you just make up problems and then pretend to care. Bloody ridiculous. I did this, there was this paragraph at the end of that article where it said, finally, it would be good to find ways to harness the passion of men on this topic and refocus it towards finding solutions for issues which women consider to be serious problems. For example, male coaches, captains and sport leaders have a critically important role to play in stopping the pervasive use of sexist and homophobic banter by other men. Yeah, we don't like homophobia either. Men can also be powerful allies in efforts to lobby governments and corporate sponsors for equitable funding for women and girls, which women consider to be the main source of unfairness in sports. Okay? You men, you get a lot more money in your sports than women do. So much more. That's something you really should be prepared to talk about. You know, the amount of money that women get for fighting in MMA. That would be good if you could talk about that. If you could talk about predatory male teachers, that would be really fabulous, actually. It's such a problem. But I don't see you talking about that. And I feel like they're being very optimistic, frankly. I don't have that optimism that men like you, Armchair, and all you other fucking guys out there who like to talk past us and talk over us and drown us out, I don't see you ever giving up this myth of male supremacy anytime soon, because that's what you're going to have to do if you are actually going to like fight for women's issues, real women's issues, women's real issues, okay? I don't see you doing that. So, next thing I'm going to talk about to a large extent. Now, you, all the other fucking guys, you'll go on and on like this is some kind of fucking debate you get to have and then you get to decide. But here's the thing, Mr. Armchair. You make the rules! None of you do! You keep acting like it's your decision, and it isn't. It's not your fucking decision, alright? Do you think they let random guys who like to mouth off of the internet make the rules about the inclusion of women in sports? No, they fucking don't. The fuck are you going on about this? Like it's for you to decide. Talking past women, refusing to listen to women, and not even looking at the rules in the first place, where the rules came from. Because there are rules, okay? There are frameworks. The Olympics have had policy for inclusion of trans women in sports since 2003, okay? They consulted scientists, blah, 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 made up policy, set out rules and guidelines and stuff like that. So trans women have actually been able to compete in the Olympics since 2003. The rules for the inclusion of trans women in the Olympics were updated last year in the summer. They did another, I think it was a year-long consultation, looked at more studies, looked at more evidence, and actually they made it a little bit easier for trans women to be included in the Olympics. Now, I'm guessing you're thinking, why is this woman talking about the Olympics when this is MMA? Well, you see, the Olympics are the people, the Olympics Committee, they're the best people who have the best resources to investigate this kind of thing, to look at all this kind of science. And if sports around the world want their sport to be included in the Olympics, they basically have to go along with Olympic guidelines. And so it makes a lot of sense for sporting bodies to base their rules and regulations on the Olympics rules and regulations, the International Olympic Committee's regulations, okay? There's no point in replicating the work. It's very unlikely that there'll be anyone with better resources to do, any sports bodies with better resources to do that. So what's the point? And obviously the Olympics covers a lot of sports, not just one. So that's kind of how it works, all right? That's where the rules come from. It's not like trans women are just rocking up and saying, hey, I'm a trans woman, I get to fight in MMA now. It's not like that, all right? There are rules. You don't get to decide them. You don't get to exclude trans women because you don't like it. And there's another thing. You talk about, you understand that that sport is a human right, but your parameters for including them are actually wrong. So, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. This is from an article by Rachel McKinnon. She is a trans woman cyclist. She did a very long article about the ethics of trans women being included in sports. I'm going to link it in the description, so do have a read. I'm going to read some little bits from it. So, sport is a human right. After a preamble, the International Olympics, the Committee's Olympic Charter lists 7 fundamental principles of Olympism. The 4th begins with, the practice of sport is a human right. That's the full sentence. And they mean competitive sport. The IOC is only concerned with competitive sport. There is no right to win in sport. There is no right to make a team selection in sport. The right is to participate and to try to win, to try to make the team, to strive for your best in the Olympic spirit of mutual understanding and of fair play. Cis women do not have a right to exclude women they don't like or don't feel comfortable with. Now, I've got to say, right, I feel like it's quite funny that this was written by a trans woman saying that, because the thing is, I think something that trans women might actually miss is that it's actually more likely to be cis men who are uncomfortable with it. Cis men like you, Armchair. All the other fucking guys who don't listen to us. Sport and society has a long history of excluding women of colour, often trading on these same claims of alleged competitive advantage or not feeling safe. But these are not rights, thus extending the right for trans women to compete in sport with other women is not in conflict with other rights. We can't make up rights and claim a conflict. Rights are socially constructed but institutionally enshrined, often in law or policy. These alleged rights that people claim are in conflict with trans women's inclusion in sports don't exist in any institutional or legal sense. So the scientific evidence is irrelevant. No competitive advantage that could ever be found to attribute it to trans women will be enough for an exclusionary policy to be both necessary and effective at promoting fairness in sport, given the massive advantages we already permit in women's sport. The human rights argument is the one that controls this debate. The benefit from promoting a worthy social goal must be proportional to the harm caused to the group or individuals discriminated against by the policy. Generally, policies that discriminate against already vulnerable or stigmatised social groups, even if they are necessary and effective in service of a worthy social goal, will fail to be sufficiently proportional. Appeal to the small size of a group will not suffice. Either the proportionality test is not a utilitarian calculus where a large group can benefit greatly at the expense of a few. So I think it's really important to be clear here, Mr. Armchair. The inclusion of trans women isn't up to you, all right? You go on about how trans women have to prove this and trans women have to prove that. But here's the thing, another little bit from Rachel's essay. What's most crucial about sport being a human right is that the default position is inclusion. The default is not exclude trans women until we have more evidence about there not being a competitive advantage. Rather, the default must be include trans women until we have sufficient evidence to justify discrimination in an international human rights framework. This is why the human rights framework controls this debate. The practice of sport is a human right. IOC Charter. Sex is a matter of legal recognition. The Court of Arbitration on Sport says that. And trans women can be legally recognised as female. Therefore, trans women have a human right to participate in competitive sport as women in the women's division. You don't get to exclude them from the women's division just because you think there's a better way. Okay? I think there's something else to be clear about here. All that science that you talk about, that trans women have to prove that they don't, there's nothing to show that the testosterone levels go down and muscle strength go down. Yes, there is. I'm going to link another video about all the science on that, or a lot of the science on it anyway, by a guy called Jangle's Science Lad. He goes through all of the usual questions that people like you go on about, including, you know, hemoglobin levels and stuff like that. And he explains why actually your fears, they're not fears. Your reasons are unfounded, okay? The evidence is there, you're just not looking at it, okay? So no matter how much you whine and stamp your feet and have a tantrum, all right? Trans women don't owe you shit. You don't make the rules. It's not up to you. You don't decide. And if you don't like it, all right, get your own scientists together. Get your own panel of informed people with the right arguments, okay? The best arguments as you see it. Go down to the International Olympic Committee, make your case, and then film it so I can watch it and laugh at their response. We are all so sick of you going on about this. Because it just reminds us so much of how little you really care about us as women and how we progress in martial arts and how we're ever going to be allowed to improve. It's just so sickening and horrible. We're sick of it. All of us. Nearly all of us. Can't really speak for all women, I guess. There are some women who are quite happy with how it is. So I think it's time to talk about what you actually owe women. Okay? You owe women a voice. You owe women a platform. You owe women the dignity of being treated like capable adults who are able to look at evidence, form our own opinions and think for ourselves and speak for ourselves. Stop shutting us out. We're sick of it. And we know you don't care about us because you never talk about the things that really concern us. Never. It's like you don't know they're real, and you probably don't. You probably ignore it. I mean, that was one of the lessons of Me Too movement. Bet you ignore all the stuff on social media that women ever talk about when it comes to this as well, don't you? You don't care because you don't listen. We know you don't care because you just don't listen. And then you make up reasons, like you just made up this reason why you don't have to listen to us, and you're always doing that. You know, it's always a big red flag when men start saying they've got good reasons for excluding women from conversations about their own lives. Massive red flag. And I think is probably another thing that's important to be clear about here. The power that you have here is the power of stochastic terrorism. In your video about rolling with women, you were very clear that the instructor who said that he wouldn't roll with women was being irresponsible because he had a big platform, and that kind of attitude would trickle down to the everyday sports gyms and clubs and stuff like that. You know that that's what you're doing. What you're really doing is discouraging women from feeling like they can really go to martial arts lessons and be respected, and you're making it even harder for trans women to feel like they can go to martial arts lessons either, and MMA gyms or whatever. That's what you're doing. You are making the atmosphere toxic for trans women and for cis women. You are encouraging this toxic atmosphere that already exists for cis women by deflecting from the real concerns of women. It's about fucking time. Oh God, I just sort of wish I could feel like this is going to make a difference, but I've been talking about this stuff for years. None of you seem to care. I've been talking about the things that women really concerned about for years. None of you care. I'm so sick of it. So, I think so the next thing I want to have a look at are some of the the other comments. I looked through all of the comments, okay, and thing that I feel is worth noting here is that yet 4 people identifying as trans in the comments. You had 3 people saying they were trans women, and 1 saying he was a non-binary masculine trans. Well, he didn't say trans, but that's non-binary is trans. It comes under trans. Now, I've got to say that's very odd. You don't normally get even 1 trans woman, self-declared at all, commenting on a YouTube video about martial arts. Not even 1 normally. So that's very odd, I have to say. I have one trans woman who, at least, who does comment on my videos, but I think it should be pretty obvious why a trans woman might feel comfortable doing that. There's a gender non-conforming, non-binary gender fluid trans person who comments on Sifu Cuttle's videos. They don't declare themselves in those comments because it's not really relevant. They're one of his patrons on Patreon. I think they've signed up for his online school. So that's it as far as I'm aware. When it comes to trans women commenting on YouTube videos, on martial arts YouTube videos. So your channel, mister, is pretty damn small. Only like 6k plus subscribers. And, you know, there's much bigger martial arts channels out there I've never seen a trans woman commenting on. How's that? Find that very odd. So this one here, I looked at them all, right? I gotta say, I think most of them weren't actually trans. I think that most of them were lying about it. This one I do think is genuine. Willow Elizabeth Ryder. And she says, I have no idea if any other commenters are trans women and martial artists. I didn't say any state so, but I am. Thanks for starting the discussion. It's not an easy topic to discuss, especially since data is lacking and research is inconsistent. Like, you know, this discussion only started then. The difficult truth is to accept is that puberty, genes and transition are so different for everyone, and trans women are such a tiny fraction of the population that aggregate data on the issue is likely never going to lead to any statistically significant findings. She's totally wrong about that, by the way. And what this means, unfortunately for both sides, is that fairness can only really be determined on an individual level. To be completely honest, I think the fairest solution would include lots of testing, and some trans women would compete with men and some would compete with women. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to pretend which tests need to be done to determine which category someone like me should fight in. But I'd take the tests and I'd fight folks that medical professionals tell me are fair to fight. Okay, like I said, I do think this woman is genuinely a trans woman. But I think it's important to be clear here that it's not representative of what trans women think, or trans men either. I follow and am followed by a lot of trans people, a number of trans people on Twitter. I've been kind of embedded in the trans community on Twitter. I mean, I would, just a small section of it. For a few years now. I know what these people say a lot of the time, and it's very unusual for them to say that, or to be so ill-informed as well, by that way. I mean, you might get your Blair Whites and your Caitlyn Jenners and your Buck Angels who are just like really desperate to fit in with the establishment and think that if they like throw their fellow trans people under the bus, it'll benefit them. And I guess to an extent it does, but it won't benefit them in the long run. It never benefits people in the long run to throw their own under the bus. But anyway, so this is my opinion on this one. Genuine trans woman, not representative, okay? I'm not saying none of them think that, but definitely not representative. So I've got somebody who identified as non-binary masculine. I agree with the idea of having an open and restricted vision. It's worked pretty well in humour, even if it has been, well, controversial. And I actually think it will help with gender issues long term by getting more people who aren't cis men into combat sports and getting them interested earlier in life, which will help to deal one way or the other that the advantages AMAP people, assigned male at birth, have from growing up doing more physical labour and playing rougher sports than AFAB people, assigned female at birth. Also, it's inclusive of trans men and intersex people who are currently excluded from MMA altogether. No, they're not, actually. That's ill-informed. Neither are excluded. There's no rules anywhere, pretty much, for the inclusion of trans men, specifically, in sports in male categories. Like Matt Beggs was not allowed to fight in a male category because of transgender law, anti-transgender law that was really aimed at trans women. But other than that, that's just in the USA. So that's not true, and intersex people are also not excluded. You just don't see them. That's it. For one thing, they are just less visible. Both trans men and intersex people. They're not that obvious in the way that trans women tend to be. And for another, they have all the problems fitting in that any marginalised group will have. So that's the reason. It's because they're marginalised people. It's not because there's rules keeping them out. Also, I just like it because as a non-binary person, if I were to compete in something, I'd prefer not to have to misgender myself to do so. Okay, so they're saying they're masculine non-binary. let's take that at face value. I'd suggest that if they're masculine non-binary, they've never actually taken any of the hormones or, you know, had any surgery or anything like that. So I don't think that they're in a position to really understand how transition is when you do all that stuff. But also it's really, that's kind of ridiculous. It's also not representative, basically, I would say. So here we have another one. ELS. I did look into all of these, by the way. Genuinely, I think the first one was the only trans woman. I am a trans woman. I'm working hard in my BJJ classes. I'm just trying to learn and grow for my own sake. I felt this is a pretty nuanced and respectful take. I appreciated it. I'm sorry. I find it very unlikely that the average trans woman is really going to say that. Most trans women will look at that and be horrified. Your video, Mr. Armchair. They really would. This is not representative. I'm not convinced that's a real trans woman. Really not. Having looked at them. And this one, this was hilarious. Okay, so Twinkling Joiner. As a trans myself, I had this question and I understand biology. And I want to have a fair competition without being misgendered as a guy. Okay, just to start with, right? I promise you, every trans person knows the word misgendered. You know, misgendered, all one word, all right? Every trans person knows that word. I don't care how dyslexic they are, I just cannot, the likelihood of a trans person writing misgendered, M-I-S-S, that's really here, misgendered, it's very unlikely they're really going to write that when they mean misgendered. So unlikely. It's amazing. HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts, does things a little bit different, and I would come to the same conclusion on wanting a trans division. But by watching this video and open divisions would be so much better, and I 100% agree. We can't argue about science, only come to a better understanding. It's hard to decide if I want to transitions because I would love to compete in MMA because of doing 3+ years of combat sports, and I would love to test out my skills and pay to see if they can pay the bills. This video helped me much better understand on how to push for an MMA match, or at least better understand what I can do for the future for trans people that's in the same bout as me. I've got to say that all that sentence structure and bad spelling, I'm not convinced I understand biology that much. I just think that is just complete rubbish. That's not genuine. I'm sorry, I had a look. I really don't think they're genuine. I'm not accusing Armchair of anything in this, by the way. I think that it's quite likely that these are people who are just lying, because there are people who will pretend to be trans people in bad faith and, you know, pretend that they are representative of trans people, and they're really not. And I feel like there was another important thing to note, actually, about the comments, referring to what I said earlier. There were no cis women in the comments, no self-declared cis women in the comments on that video that you made talking about trans women fighting cis women in MMA. None, not a single one. I looked through all of them, okay? I didn't look through all the replies to all of the comments, but I looked through all the replies, not a single one, all right? So, it's not like there were cis women in the comments saying, oh, Mr. Armchair, thank you so much for saving us, riding us to the rescue, save us from these terrible, massive trans women who's just going to beat us to death in the octagon. No, they're not saying that. Funny how they're not saying that in your comments. Why aren't they saying that? If this is such a big deal, where are they saying that? know why? Because I don't think that. I don't believe you. That's not what you're doing. I mean, you don't have any cis women agreeing with you either. Or disagreeing with you. You've got no cis women disagreeing with you or agreeing with you. None. Not a single one. Kind of confirms my opinion, which I said at the beginning, that not only were you not asking cis women, you weren't even talking to cis women. It's pretty clear any cis women watching that did not feel like you were talking to her. Certainly didn't feel like you were talking to me. You're a guy talking to guys, excluding women, because that's what you do all the fucking time, and we're sick of it. I don't know how many times I can say that, but probably not enough. Okay, so next fun thing that you said. Now, you have this thing where you say that male puberty is like this thing where once the testosterone flows through the body, that's it, your body is fixed for life. When you take all the testosterone, that's it. Even after puberty, if you're a cis woman taking testosterone to boost your performance, once it's all bigged up, once you're bigger, everything's set for life. No, it's not. Look, this is Alana McLaughlin, okay? This is her before she transitioned. This is her after she transitioned, when she actually fought in an MMA fight. Did you not see this? Because that was going around on Twitter, okay? It's very obvious that Alana McLaughlin, after transitioning, is nowhere near the size she was before, okay? She's like a welterweight there, I reckon. Maybe even a middleweight, definitely welterweight. Here, she's a featherweight, she's 145 pounds. Because that's the maximum weight, by the way, that women are allowed to fight at. Something that none of you guys ever talk about, of course, because you're happy that way. If your build-back hypothesis was true, Alana McLaughlin would look exactly the same. And on top of that, she would not be able to fight in the women's divisions because she'd still be a welterweight. And like me, who is a middleweight, all right, she wouldn't be able to fight women. She'd have to fight men. Except I'm not allowed to fight men either, so I'm just not allowed to fight at all because I'm a cis woman who is much heavier than 145 pounds. And I think, again, you need to refer to the Jangle Science Lad video. And it will tell you all about the way that trans women do reduce when they take HRT and stuff. It really is quite a big deal. You know, I follow a fair number of trans people, like I said. They do like reduce quite a lot. Yeah, I should have mentioned that guy, that person who was claiming to be trans, who was into misgingering. He did say that he hasn't actually transitioned. So even if you take what he said at face value, if he's never actually tried to transition, he doesn't actually have a clue, doesn't really know how transition affects you. It's this thing that you do, all you guys, you do this, you basically try and say that trans women are the same as cis women. And they're really, cis men. And they're really, really not. Oh, another thing, right? You were going on about how beard growth stays. Like if cis women take testosterone and they start growing beards, then even if they stop taking the testosterone, the beards still grow. I don't know where you got that from. Do you do any research at all? I mean, I don't know if it is like that for cis women who take testosterone, but when trans women transition, they don't grow a beard anymore, okay? They don't have to shave when they take all the estrogen. That's bullshit. Do you even do any research at all, ever? I have to wonder. And like, look at this, all right? Even if you were to take her beard off there, Her skull is even bigger, all right? It's got narrower. Her face has got narrower. Her head has got narrower. You know, after a couple of years on estrogen, your body does reduce if you were a man, if you were assigned male at birth and you went through male puberty. It does do that. And if she were, and you said something about build back up, you know, like, even if it was all taken away, they could build back up. Well, I don't know, like, how it works that you think they're still exactly the same, but they still need to build back up, or they could still build back up. Don't know quite how that works. But anyway, say Alana McLaughlin were to build back up. Well, first of all, she'd have to detransition. She'd have to take all the testosterone again, stop taking estrogen, and then she'd go back up to that, okay? And then she wouldn't be able to fight as a woman before because, as previously mentioned, she'd been way heavier than 145 pounds because that's the limit for women in MMA. Okay, so now we're going to talk about bone density. First of all, I think it's important to say, what does it matter? You guys, you're always going on about this. The thing is, you have weight classes and stuff. That really takes care of a lot of that. I mean, like I said, I'm middleweight. I'm under 5'2", and I weigh about 180 pounds. I think my bone density is probably quite high in comparison to a lot of people's. Never actually measured it, but you know, Sifu Cuddle is well over 6 foot, and he doesn't weigh a lot more than I do. So, you know, we'd actually be in the same weight class, and I'd be fighting him if I were allowed to fight men. I mean, you know, if he was on a course of HRT for 2 years, then, you know, maybe he'd go like that, and then he'd be smaller than me, not able to fight me in the same weight class. I mean, Brian's not trans. I'm not saying he's going to do that. It's just, you know, it's just quite amusing that he's so tall and doesn't weigh much more than me, to be honest. Although, you know, I think I'd probably still win a fight against him anyway, let's face it, considering his extreme reluctance to come up with a video replicating any of my videos. I'm not stopping him. He just can't. Look, Brian, you can do that any time. I'm not stopping you, okay? But I always think you just can't match me. That's what I think. And that's before any hormones. Okay, so anyway, yeah, bone density, get back to that. Right, trans women, you did say something about how trans women do actually, their bone density increases when they transition. Oh, for God's sake. And, oh, what on earth? And they do. That is absolutely, certainly the case, okay? The problem is that they're starting actually from a really low bar. So there's a study in the Netherlands, I'm going to link that below, all right, which shows that the bone density of, they study the bone density, they monitor the bone density of trans people, both men and women, trans men and trans women. They come, they present, they start monitoring the bone density before they transition, they monitor it throughout transition, and they keep going after transition. And they do this because trans men in particular need to worry about their bone health, because once they start taking the testosterone, their bone density actually goes down. So, funny thing, yes, trans women's bone density does go up when they transition from male to female, when they take the estrogen and stuff. But their bone density is the lowest of this group, right? So we're talking about people who have gone through male puberty before transition and then transitioned, right? And then people who've gone through female puberty and then transitioned to male. People who've gone through female puberty before they transition to male have the highest bone density, okay? So, trans men who've gone through female puberty before they transition have higher bone density than trans men after transition, trans women both before and after transition. The results actually equalise. So after transition, the bone density of trans men and cis women kind of become closer together, because pre-transition trans women who've gone through male puberty, they have lowest bone density. And here's another interesting thing, these charts here, right? So we've got cis men and cis women. For this purposes, we're just looking at cis men. So the average height of cis men in Sweden here, 180 centimetres, the average weight, 86.8 kilos, all right? In Sweden again, average height and weight of trans women participants, again this is before they transition, height 180 centimetres, weight 73 kilos. That's more than 13 kilos lighter, even at the same height. Netherlands and Belgium. So Netherlands and Belgium, we've got 183, 181 centimetres high, 87.4 kilos, 87.8 kilos, all right? 179 centimetres high, so actually shorter. Trans women, this is, before they transition, than cis men, okay? 72.8 kilos. That's an even bigger difference, all right? That's like 15 kilos in Belgium, all right? Height of, in Italy, all right? So we've got 177 centimetres for cis men, 83.6 kilos for cis men, okay? And then trans women in Italy before transitioning, 180 centimetres, a little bit taller, but get this, 73 kilos. Again, with 10 kilos lighter, all right? Now you have this obsession going on about, and you constantly do this throughout the video, you claim that basically trans women are the same as cis men. You do this a lot. You talk like there's no difference between a trans woman who has transitioned and a cis man. But here's the thing, trans women, before they transition, even after they go through puberty, they're still not the same as cis men. Now I don't know why that is, but that's how it is. And you are I get the kind of assumption that before transition they're the same, but they're really not. They're still lighter, they're still not much short, they're not taller, definitely. Sometimes they're shorter. And they have the lowest bone density of any group that would be tested normally. So they're not the same, even before they transition. So your constant equivalence of between trans women and cis men, it's false. Even before they transition, and after they transition, it's massively different, okay? Like another thing, so we've got bone density by race. So here we have, so the purple is white female, brown is black female, Mexican American female. So this is females, okay? So white females have fairly low. This is by age, right? So this is starting from 0 to 80 plus. So look at around 20, 29, around 20 is the highest time. Black women have significantly higher bone density than white women, cis this is, okay? And in fact, if you look at white men here, this is men, at the same time, they actually have lower bone density than black women. Alright? So, what are you going to do? You're going to ban black women from fighting cis women in MMA? Don't think so. Because you know that's racist. I think you do, anyway. I hope you do. Because historically that was a thing that happened. Black women were banned from the Olympics for having high bone density because they were considered to have an unfair advantage. Bone density is bullshit, okay? This whole thing of you going on about bone density is rubbish. Okay, so now we're going to talk about why it is that women are segregated in, I don't know what that was, sports. And actually, Armchair, and all you fucking guys, women are not segregated from sports, from men in sports because of male advantage or because men might hurt women. That's not the reason, all right? Historically, they were banned from sports quite a lot of the time. Sort of way back in the 19th century, only rich people really had the time and the money for sports. So it's generally, it's been rich people. I've heard of Roger Bannister, who broke the 4-minute mile. He was at Cambridge University, an elite university. He was rich. It's a bit like, Darwin being able to go off gallivanting to the Galapagos Islands and look at dodos or whatever. It's generally rich people who could do this. And even now, you do need money to be able to participate in sports to competition level, or even at all a lot of the time. And that's often what's excluding women. But also, they were specifically banned. And this here is a tweet thread by Kirsty Miller, who she was actually a sports star going by the name of Warren Miller. Now, it's not normally considered a good thing to use a trans person's dead name, but Kirsty Miller regularly posts her name and pictures from the time that she was a sports star, presenting as male. And she does this in part because she wants to bust that myth, this idea that trans women are only transitioning so that they can have an advantage in sport. And she still does the transitioning, by the way. She still does the sports. She's still very into it. I get a lot of information from her about trans people in sports and stuff. And it's quite common. She said that she was very much doing the sports because she was trying to prove herself as male, as masculine. And I think that's kind of a common thing, that trans women, before they transition, will quite often put a lot of effort into being masculine. But equally, they'll still quite often be into those things, so they'll maybe pick on something that they're into that seems masculine. Computers is a really common one. So many trans people are into computers and computer gaming. But they'll still be into it once they've transitioned. So anyway, this is about from what Kirsty Miller says about the history of the inclusion of women, cis women, in sports. Policies that impact the practice of trans women in competitive sport emanate from the parallel history of efforts to define the female category in ways that excluded those women whose bodies were deemed not conform to normative standards of femininity. The women's sports category is the result of historical exclusion of women from competitive sport, which was underpinned by pathologising discourses about their bodies and the harms of their participation in physical activities. Forbidden to take part explicitly in sports from the end of the 19th century, women organised their own competitions during the 20th century. and gained some access to sports that were prohibited to them, like the organisation of Women's World Games in 1922 by the FSFI, International Women's Sports Federation, in response to the ban on participation for women in many Olympic events. Now, since women were in their own categories, it's hardly that they were being banned because they didn't want poor little ladies being beaten by all the men, is it? Throughout this period, women athletes were subjected to a virilization trial, the accusation of not sufficiently meeting the socially expected criteria of femininity, not being enough of a woman by society standards because of traits like having muscles. Yeah. I think I might have been banned. Wearing sportswear deemed masculine, or because of their hairstyle or body hair. This virilization trial, which is found in discourses, and the exclusion by sports organisations from allowing some women to compete in their competitions, gradually became systematised by the femininity test, behind the pretext of protecting the women's category of potential imposters. Sports federations sought to establish gender control to police femininity and performances. In this context, being a woman is understood as having physical capacities inferior to men, as evidenced by sex controls. At the 1966 European Athletics Championship, the athletes were subjected to an anatomical and physical test attesting they were women. Therefore, if their body matched medical expectations and if their performance were lower than men's, they were cleared as women for the event. So what you got there is women being excluded from competing with women because they were as good as or better than men. That's what happened, okay? It's not about protecting women from men, it's about protecting men from the possibility that women might actually be as good as them. That's what it is. There are many social factors involved in keeping the women's category of sport inferior to the men's. Women are banned from sports competitions. For example, women's marathon was absent from the Olympic Games for 84 years. Was that because they were worried about men not being able to control themselves when they saw women doing a marathon? I don't know. Women were excluded from Olympic boxing until 2012. Women were not allowed to take part in the Olympic ski jumping event until 2014. We can also give the case of the Olympic skeet event, which is like rifles, guns. I don't know much more than that. I'm not a gun person. Which was originally mixed gender, but after the victory of a woman, Shang Zhang, in 1992, women were banned from this event at the 1996 Olympics. Not that long ago. The possibility for women to participate in the event was reinstated in 2000 with a women-only category and with different shooting criteria, making it so the performance of men and women were not directly comparable. During the 2021 Olympic Canoe Kayak Championship, women did not have races longer than 500 metres, while men's races were 1,000 metres long. Another example of differences between men's and women's sports which have the effect of maintaining the positioning of men's and women's elite sport, i.e. making sure that men still seem better than women. Women have had to quit sport, change clubs/trainer, practice in deteriorated conditions due to sexual violence, classism, racism and intersex phobia or transphobia. Other social factors have been forgotten in most articles about competitive differences between men and women. lack of women's teams depending on sports and geographical positions, disparities in access to sports facilities for women's teams, lack of financial resources, transphobia impacts access to public spaces. 97% of trans people in Ontarian studies, that's Ontario, Canada, reported to have avoided at least one type of public space. Gyms were the second most avoided after public washrooms because of their trans status. And that, Mr. Armchair, is what you are contributing to. This is what I described earlier as stochastic terrorism, right? You are contributing to all those trans women feeling like they can't go to a gym. Another interesting thing to note, the UK has 39 trans rugby players, 35 of them are trans men. I'm sure you're thinking that all those poor little trans men are getting beaten up because they're really women. I'm sure you're thinking that. That's like irritating me. Now you had this sort of proposal for the inclusion of for an open division for women, that women could also fight in as well as trans women, and then like a separate women's division. Now obviously you're assuming that cis women won't be fighting in that, but as I've already mentioned, I'm actually excluded because I'm too heavy. I'm a middleweight. I'm not bloody losing, going down to 145 pounds just so I can fight in MMA. Nobody should have to. So what that would mean is that I could actually fight in MMA. And it would improve the women's game actually, because women currently do not get the experience that men do. There's just not enough of them to fight against, either at amateur level or at professional level. So like Amanda Nunes just does not get the kind of challenges that Conor McGregor has been getting, because Conor McGregor's got more people with more experience and who are better to fight against than Amanda Nunes, who can basically beat everyone in her division. So it would actually be better, it would be an improvement. But I don't know if I'm going to see that happening anytime soon, because I think we need to talk about your personal attitude towards women. So, you go on about how it would be like you fighting a straw weight, like you said you're 5'9", and I guess you're about a lightweight, 155 pounds. That's what I'm guessing. But you go on about yourself fighting a strawweight woman and how this is somehow an equivalent between trans women and cis women in the same weight division, even though it's really not. And you say that you're not, and you talk about middle school children as well, like it would be like if you were to fight middle school children. Middle school children are like 10 to 14 in the USA. And here's the thing about strawweight, okay, 115 pounds, that's about the weight of a healthy weight for the average 15-year-old in the UK. Seeing a bit of a pattern here, right? You like thinking of women as being basically like underage teenagers. It's kind of how you like them. That's the body shape that you're comfortable with, I would say. You know, you say that you're not comparing women to middle school children, but you actually are, because when you say that if you were to fight probably a lightweight were to fight a middle school child, or a strawweight woman who was not like a 15-year-old, when you compare that to a trans woman like Alana McLaughlin fighting Celine Prevost, who is several inches taller than her, by the way, when you compare that, what you're saying is that a trans woman is rubbish, because you say that, but you're also saying that in comparison with like a 145-pound trans woman, Celine Prevost is like less than a straw weight. That's what you're saying. You're actually saying that because it's not a reasonable comparison to make. That does not compare at all. If it did, it wouldn't have taken as long for Alana McLaughlin to beat Celine Prevost. Like, there's a world of difference between a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old and a 22-year-old woman who's fully trained. A world of difference. And this is you again reducing women like you always do, like you want to. And this is why there's only the weight classes in MMA only go up to 145 pounds. Because it makes you uncomfortable to see women even as big as that, doesn't it? Because that's how you like to think of women, as cis women. And I really don't like it when you try and pretend that that's not how you think of us. It's what you wanted to keep us as. Because if you didn't, you would be talking about the fact that me, for example, I couldn't fight in MMA because I'm too heavy. But I know I don't have the right build. I do not have a build of a 15-year-old, I know that. I barely had the build of a 15-year-old when I was 15. There was, like I said, I looked through the comments and you were saying very specifically that Alana McLaughlin and Fallon Fox were rubbish. You were quite specific about that. And I've got to say, you know, Alana McLaughlin won her fight against Celine Prevost. Fallon Fox's sort of rating was like 5 wins, 1 loss and a draw, I think. Something like that. So when you say that trans women are rubbish, you're saying that the women who lose against are even worse. That's what you're saying. And you keep saying that because you want it to be true, even though you know it's not. On some level, you know it's not. And, yeah. Well, I love this idea of you fighting of you had of open divisions, because I do think it would be good for women actually to be allowed to fight men. It would mean that I wouldn't be excluded anymore. It would mean that a lot of women would be able to fight in MMA. Much as I like that idea, much as you put forward that idea, you won't like it when women do fight, cis women do fight cis men in those divisions. You won't like it because you will have to admit that that myth that you keep peddling about you being able to destroy any woman who's your same weight and skill level, that would be completely busted, and you don't want to see that. So I don't think that's going to happen either. This is really just about you wanting to exclude trans women. Because the reason you want to exclude trans women is because when cis women fight trans women, you think of them as cis women fighting men. And you do not want cis women to get into their heads the idea that maybe, just maybe, if they can fight trans women, well, maybe they can fight cis men too. That's what you want to avoid. That's what this is all about, which is why there won't be an open division either. Because there just might be a woman who might actually do it, a cis woman who might actually do it. So there's a few things that you actually talked about in the video that I specifically want to points up, which were kind of amusing. So the first thing was LGBT activism is on one side of the discussion. This is what you said about at the intro, in your introduction. And anyone who knows anything about combat sports is usually on the other side. Actually, Mr. Armchair, it's men like you who are on the other side. Most women, as I have already demonstrated, are not on your side. And you're peddling this myth again. It's ridiculous. And you talk about judging the testosterone levels. Like you claim that, it's this thing you have with men being different to women and trans women being basically like cis men. Testosterone levels, you go on about that a fair bit. And you say that even trans activists agree with you about this, that like generally the testosterone levels of men is higher than women, like even if you, like obviously there's some overlap. And like, what do you mean even? We know this, we're not denying it. I don't know why you're saying even, like we've been arguing about it. We haven't. I do know why you're saying that, because he wants to paint us as irrational and not looking at the logic and shit like that. That's why. And it's really actually kind of misleading in the context of comparing cis men and cis women, or cis men and trans women. Really is, like I've already demonstrated, doesn't really work that way. And, there was a little bit of a thing where it flashed up on your screen. Some exceptions exist for DSD, differences of sex development. Now, I think the reason you're saying that is because Caster Semenya was excluded from from like the 400 metres by the International Athletics Federation, and in fact the UN had something to say about that. Where is that? I think I've lost the, oh, here we go. Well, here's part of it. For our purposes, another issue is whether the harm to trans women caused by excluding them from women's sport is proportional to any proposed benefit to cis women. In an unprecedented move, this is it. The UN Human Rights Council released a statement calling on the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to look into discriminatory policies in sport, including restrictions on endogenous testosterone in women, i.e. the rules made to exclude Caster Semenya. Calling out the International Association of Athletics Federation by name, the statement reads in part, expresses concern that discriminatory regulations, rules and practices that may require women and girl athletes with differences of sex development, androgen sensitivity and levels of testosterone to medically reduce their blood testosterone levels contravene international human rights norms and standards, including the right to equality and non-discrimination, the right to highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, the right to sexual and reproductive health, the right to work and to the enjoyment of just and favourable conditions of work, the right to privacy, the right to freedom from torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment and harmful practices, and the full respect for the dignity, bodily integrity and bodily autonomy of the person. Statement also explicitly refers to the aforementioned international human rights framework, noting with concern also that the eligibility regulations for female classification published by the International Association of Athletics Federations that came into effect on 1st November 2018 are not compatible with international human rights norms and standards, including the rights of women with differences of sex development, and concerned at the absence of legitimate and justifiable evidence for the regulations to the extent that they may not be reasonable and objective, and there is no clear relationship of proportionality between the aims of the regulations and the proposed measures and their impact. So, when you flash up that thing about exceptions exist for DSD, well, those exceptions that exist are deemed against their human rights, okay? And if you don't like it, go to the UN and complain. And another thing, there's a lot of overlap, really. Like, you go on about how the average woman is bigger than the average man. Yeah, sure, that is absolutely the case. But here's a thing. Now these are tables. These are from a study of 693 elite athletes. So we're talking about elite athletes here, okay? People who have trained. All right. So we've got, I don't know if the cup's in the way. Shortest man, so blue for man, pink for woman. Shortest man, 150 centimetres. Elite sportsman this is, right? Tallest, over 7 foot, right? Shortest woman, not much more than about 5 foot. Tallest woman, this is in elite sports, over 6 foot. So, yes, the average man is bigger and stronger than the average woman, all right? But if you get a woman who's the same, you can get plenty of women who are the same size and weight as the average man. That happens, plenty. And the same thing for weight. So you've got the person of the lowest weight, so over 90 kilos, the woman. Woman of the highest weight, pounds, 90 pounds. Woman of the highest weight, nearly up to 200 pounds. I'm here, this is me, kind of in the middle apparently. So, yeah, and then with men, you've got the smallest man, under around 100 pounds, over 300 pounds for the biggest men. And this is elite sports people, okay? So there's a lot of overlap. And for you to go on about the average man versus the average woman just doesn't work, especially because there are weight classes. And if we were to have open weight divisions and everyone, all people, cis women as well as trans women, could only compete in the open divisions, well then what you'd have is a large number of women in the lower divisions because they're smaller and a large number of men in the higher divisions. But there'd be a lot of overlap because you're not going to have the average man fighting the average woman in MMA, are you? Because the weight difference is too great. So for you to go on about that is deeply disingenuous, and you know it. I know you do. So there's a little bit more in here from Rachel McKinnon's article. Claims like men are stronger than women are strictly speaking false. There are many women who are stronger than many men. I, for example, have actually been stronger than the average man since I reached maturity. That was before I started Kung Fu lessons. These claims instead are either the average man is stronger, taller, faster, etc., than the average woman, or the best man is stronger, taller, faster, etc., than the best woman. At present, these latter claims are true, but both elide the massive ranges within men and women. The shortest, weakest, slowest man is often the same as the shortest, weakest, and slowest woman. Elite women athletes are considerably stronger than the average cis man, and certainly the average trans woman. The average height of the Rio 2016 Olympics high jump podium was 6 foot 1.7 inches. The 10th place woman in the final is 5 foot 5. The gold medalist is 6 foot 3.6 inches and was the tallest in the competition. The global average height for men is around 5 foot 9. Moreover, height is not uniformly distributed around the world. The average Dutch woman is 5 foot 6.5 inches, whereas the average Indonesian woman is 4 foot 10. So, you're going to divide up by country as well, so that you can protect Indonesian women from those massive Dutch women. Don't think so. Oh, and another thing, because of that weight limit that women have, you're not going to have massive great trans women fighting women anytime soon, cis women anytime soon in MMA, because most trans women are actually probably going to be a bit too big. Alana McLaughlin, I mean, a lot of them are about Alana McLaughlin's size, to be fair, because as we've previously discussed, a lot of trans women aren't that big necessarily, but you're not going to see great hulking trans women fighting tiny cis women because of the weight classes, and because the weight classes would just exclude them anyway. I think that's important to note, really. We permit huge differences in natural physical traits within sport and call that fair. So even if we say that the average trans woman is 4 inches taller than the average cis woman, we already permit much larger height differences within women's sport and call it fair. So Celine Prevost is 5 foot 11, Alana McLaughlin's 5 foot 7. So Celine Prevost is 4 inches taller than Alana McLaughlin. Just for example. This is true for any natural physical trait one selects, including endogenous testosterone. While there's no evidence of a relationship between endogenous, internal, natural, testosterone and performance, my point is that even if there were, it's insufficient to justify excluding trans women. We demonstrably permit competitive advantages within women's sport that are far greater than 10 to 12%. Fairness does not require that no athlete have a competitive advantage over her competitor. In fact, that's the entire purpose of training, coaching, equipment, nutrition and so on. And fairness does not require us to exclude those who have considerable performance advantages. And you said something about it's like you fighting a lightweight. Look, I just wish you'd stop this thing where you fighting someone 30 pounds lighter than you is somehow comparable to Alana McLaughlin fighting Celine Prevost. It really isn't. It's not a comparable thing at all. I love this one, this quote here. Having someone compete with significant and statistically impossible advantages is unconscionable. Okay, so we've already dealt with that a bit, but you're going to ban Michael Phelps with his massive great hands and feet that are like flippers, and his ability to flush lactic acid so he doesn't feel that tired. He absolutely dominates men's swimming, he has done for years. He's got advantages over the average elite sportsman in swimming that trans women could never have. Far bigger. Even before they compete, he's probably got bigger advantages. Before they transition, he's got bigger advantages. It's kind of ridiculous for you to just keep saying this when that's not how sports works. It's really not. And I think another thing, you are trying to discriminate against, this idea of open divisions. The idea is that you're discriminating against trans women so much that they are effectively excluded. That's illegal, actually. Under the human rights framework, that's not allowed. And it should be pretty clear. So, trans athletes' right to compete are not contingent on showing that there isn't a competitive advantage. Additionally, because proving a negative is literally impossible, people who oppose trans women inclusion can forever demand more study and the need for more evidence before they'll relent. But that day will never come, for they'll continue to manufacture potential sources of evidence, even in the absence of any scientific evidence suggesting such a thing exists. What does matter is the human rights framework. Some balk at the idea that sport is a human right. Others frame this as debate about trans women in sport as pitting trans women's rights against cis women's rights in a kind of conflict of rights. But there is no conflict of rights. I'm going to read this again, all right? Sport is a human right. After a preamble, the IOC's Olympic Charter lists 7 fundamental principles of Olympism. The 4th begins with, the practice of sport is a human right. That's the first full sentence, and they mean competitive sport. IOC is only concerned with competitive sport. There is no right to win in sport. There is no right to make a team selection in sport. The right is to participate and to try to win, try to make the team, to strive for your best in the Olympic spirit. Of mutual understanding and fair play. Cis men and women do not have a right to exclude women they don't like or don't feel comfortable with. Sport and history has a long history of excluding women of colour, often trading on those same claims of alleged competitive advantages or not feeling safe. These are not rights. Thus, extending the right for trans women to compete in sport with other women is not in conflict with other rights. Rights are socially constructed but institutionally enshrined, often in law or policy. These alleged rights that people claim are in conflict with trans women's inclusion in sports don't exist in any institutional or legal sense. What's most crucial about sport being a human right is that the default position is inclusion. The default is not exclude trans women until we have more evidence about there not being a competitive advantage. The default must be include trans women until we have sufficient evidence to justify discrimination in an international human rights framework. This is why the human rights framework controls this debate. The practice of sport is a human right. Sex is a matter of legal recognition. You don't get to decide that. And trans women can be legally recognised as female. Therefore, trans women have a human right to participate in competitive sport as women. You don't get to say otherwise. I think there's another. There's another bit that I just really want to read again. I can't find it. So, another thing that you say. Yeah, you're like, oh, I can't compete 125 pounds because I'm too heavy. Well, no, you can't. You have to lose weight. And this consistent comparing yourself as like competing at a lower weight with a trans woman competing with a cis woman of the same weight is ridiculous. That's not a reasonable comparison, right? Now here's a final thing that you say. I think the MMA community is largely on the same side when it comes to transgender athletes. Yeah, well, you're mostly men, aren't you? You're like 90% men. But if you look at the women, they're not on the same side as you. I've already demonstrated that. And the reason there's only been 2 trans women MMA fighters, okay, is because of the history of exclusion of trans people from sports. Like, they don't even feel like they can go to a martial arts lesson because of people like you. That's the reason. And I'm just going to end by saying, I really don't think that you are arguing in good faith. I really don't. I don't think that you actually care about women, about the safety of women. I think that really what you care about is excluding women from being able to fight well. And here's a really funny one, right? If you are being blatantly transphobic, I will ban you for being a bigot. Well, you should ban yourself because you're a fucking bigot. Okay? If you call any discussion or on biology or fairness transphobia, I will ban you for being stupid. Well, I guess you're going to ban anyone from the International Olympics Committee or from the UN Commission on Human Rights, aren't you? Because let's face it, that's what this is really about. It is about ignoring the human rights. It's about excluding trans women. It's about making cis women feel small. Making it harder for cis women to feel like they can ever compete against men, because you don't want that. Stop pretending you care about us. Women know that you don't care about us. We know that you don't care about us. Stop pretending that that's the case, okay? If you want to show that you care about us, talk about things that we really care about. Read that blog on how to be an ally to women in Muay Thai, okay? If you want to start showing that you care about us, talk about the things that we're concerned about. Stop drowning us out when it comes to any discussion about trans women in MMA. Actually fucking listen to us, okay? Give women a platform. Because I don't see you doing that yet. So I don't think you care, and neither do all the other women who are watching. We really don't.